Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the centenary anniversary of the Second Battle of Bullecourt. My name is Gerard Pratt, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Captain Michael Manfield. We warmly welcome Mr. Mark Donaldson, recipient of the Victoria Cross of Australia, who is joining us this evening. We also welcome Mr. Gordon Ramsay, ACT Minister for Veterans Affairs, and Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We are honoured to acknowledge the Australian Rugby League Commission Chairman and the National Rugby League CEO, as well as the representatives from the Australian and New Zealand men's and women's Anzac National Rugby League test teams and the junior captains who are joining us this evening. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, St John the Baptist Primary School, Woy Woy South. From Victoria, Warrenwood Primary School. Plenty Parklands Primary School, Mill Park, and Mercy College, Coburg. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. Today marks the 100th anniversary of the Second Battle of Bullecourt in France during the First World War. During the disastrous First Battle of Bullecourt on the 11th of April 1917, which resulted in over 3,000 Australian casualties, a second attempt was made on this day 100 years ago by troops of the Australian 2nd Division to capture the heavily fortified town which was part of the German Hindenburg Line. The battle began at 3:45 a.m. on the morning of 3 May, when the Australian 5th and 6th Brigades, along with the British 67th Division, advanced, supported by an effective artillery barrage. They encountered heavy enemy machine gun and artillery fire, but despite this, the Australians broke into the German frontline positions and held them against furious and costly German counterattacks. As the battle intensified over the next week, the 2nd Division was bolstered by the 1st Division. By the 10th of May, both divisions were exhausted and the 5th Division was brought into the battle. On the 15th of May, the Germans relinquished their hold on what remained of Bullecourt and withdrew. British forces then occupied the town. The battle ended on the 17th of May with both sides exhausted by the struggle. The Australians suffered over 7,000 casualties for the capture of a small and tactically useless village. Today we remember all those who died in the Second Battle of Bullecourt and whose names are recorded here on the Roll of Honour. We will recall the story of just one today, Private Alfred Charles Gouda, of the 17th Battalion, who was killed in action during the Second Battle of Bullecourt on the 3rd of May, 1917. I now invite you all to please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Children, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through until the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, during the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection. Thank you, folks.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Alfred Charles Gouda. Alfred Gouda was born in 1895 to John and Lydia Gouda of Inverell, New South Wales. He was the youngest of 6 children and lost his mother when he was a young boy. Alfred attended the local public school and went on to work as a labourer for a Mr. George in Otho Street, Tinga. He later worked on Wallangra Station and was a well-known figure in Inverell, where he had many friends. Alfred Gouda was recognised as a first-rate bushman and a crack rifle shot. Alfred Gouda enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in April 1916. He went into camp in Armidale and during his training was selected to serve in the trench mortars. He underwent specialist training at Menangle and left Australia for active service overseas in October 1916. Private Gouda first went to England, where he continued his training throughout the winter, and then to France in mid-March 1917. Around this time, he transferred from the trench mortars to the infantry and served with the 17th Battalion. Around the time Private Gouda joined the 17th Battalion, it was involved in the follow-up of the German forces after their retreat to the Hindenburg Line. Shortly afterwards, the 17th Battalion helped defeat a German counterattack at Langencourt. Then on the 3rd of March 1917, the battalion participated in the Second Battle of Bullecourt, suffering heavy casualties. A month later, Alfred Gouda's sister, Mrs. Griffey, received word that her brother was officially reported missing from the date of that battle. The family were left with little information for months. Authorities conducted an investigation into the fate of Private Gouda, but they were not able to find details of his death. In the end, with no trace of Gouda as a prisoner of war in Germany or in any hospital, a court of inquiry ruled that he had been killed in action on the 3rd of May 1917 at the Second Battle of Bullecourt. In the 1920s, John Gouda chose an inscription for his youngest son's grave. It read, "In memory of his laughing eyes and the smile upon his face, are the constant vision memory brings, no one can fill his place." John Gouda's words went unused, as Alfred's body was never recovered. Today, he is commemorated on the memorial to the missing at Villa Bretneau. Alfred Gouda was 23 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Alfred Charles Gouda, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Colourful party trees, arms!
lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catholic Party, outwards, turn. Catholic Party, quick, march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the Last Post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Could I ask that the Australian and New Zealand men's and women's